Hey everybody, this is Mr. Maupin coming at you here with another APUSH video. This time we're taking a look at topic 6.2, focusing in on economic development through westward expansion. So when we talk about, the development of the West, particularly, in the latter half of the 19th century, we're talking about new opportunities in various types of industries, be it railroads, mining, cattle ranching, farming, things like that are going to start to define, in many respects, the western half of the United States, but obviously you're going to have national effects. The first thing we're going to be taking a look at is the impact of railroads. When we are talking about the railroads, obviously the most intensely debated thing dealing with infrastructure leading up to the Civil War was the construction of a transcontinental railroad. First of all, whether or not the federal government should be subsidizing this kind of infrastructure. Democrats traditionally had not believed in that, but Whigs and then eventually, the more modern Republicans are going to be wanting that. Now, when Southern Democrats leave Congress during the Civil War, Republicans are going to have pretty much a free hand to transform the federal government's responsibilities. And that's going to include lots of investment in railroads, particularly transcontinental railroads. And the question is, why? I mean, what was the goal in producing these railroads? Well, we're talking about, for one thing, settling the territories that had been obtained in the last 50 years, be it the Louisiana Purchase, the Mexican Cession, the Oregon Territory. All those places had very little American population. And so the federal government wanted to see that happen. They wanted to see that development. And so the idea being is the more, and you hate to say it in these terms, but in essence, more white Americans settling there was a sense then that America would have more control over that territory. Additionally, there's also going to be significant commercial desires in terms of having these transcontinental railroad lines being able to move products and goods from coast to coast all across the country. Now, when we take a look at the map of these early transcontinental railroad lines, the first one is going to be the famous Transcontinental Railroad. That is going to be really an interesting race between two rival railroad companies. The Union Pacific going from Chicago heading west, and the Central Pacific headed from Sacramento east. Now, to try to maximize the speed at which these companies laid track, you're going to see the federal government incentivize these companies by not just awarding them the actual land where the rail lines are going to be actually laid, but you're also going to see additional land grants adjacent to either side of these railways. Could be upwards of a mile in either direction. And that's going to be critical because these are the new highways of the West. Think of like an Interstate 71 today. Think about, all the commercial stuff, all the restaurants, shops, businesses, whatever, that are real close to Interstate 71. And that's the same kind of thing here. So this is going to become extremely valuable real estate in the future. So these companies were told, well, every mile of track that you build, well, that's more adjacent land that you're going to be given by the federal government. So it basically creates a race between the Central Pacific heading eastward and the Union Pacific heading westward. We will eventually see these two lines come together at Promontory Point in Utah, the famous Golden Spike driven in to connect the two. And so now for the first time, we're going to be able to see Americans travel and goods and services go by rail from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast. But as you can see here on the map, this is not going to be the last transcontinental railroad line that's going to be built. There's going to be several others going to be built shortly afterwards. For example, the Northern Pacific going from Minnesota out to Seattle. You got the Southern Pacific going from New Orleans all the way through California up to San Francisco. So you can see here that in the late 19th century, there's going to be this massive, massive expansion in railroad development. Not just what was in the northeastern half of the United States pre-Civil War, but you're going to be seeing it all across the West. It's going to be a massive investment. Now, one of the problems with this, and this is what happens when anytime there's like kind of a boom in an industry, people get very greedy, people get very excited, and they tend to think, ooh, this is the new hot thing, and this is guaranteed to be a moneymaker. I just need to make sure I put money investing in this case, railroads. Well, all this does is create this economic bubble, and then eventually these bubbles do burst, and we're going to see a bubble burst that's pretty nasty in 1873. We'll see an even nastier one in 1893, and when that happens, you're going to see a lot of folks lose their money and investments in the railroad industries when, you know, there's too much building in it and not enough demand to use it at given times. Additionally, as we see the westward expansion of the railroads, you know, Americans in Congress, you know, tend to think that there's no real people out there, which obviously is false. You've got many, many, many different tribal nations that are out there, and this is going to mark the beginning of the end of their way of life. As we see, you know, for example, rail lines are going to be bringing about more white Americans that are going to believe that Native Americans need to be placed on reservations. We start to see the buffalo being hunted in mass. The buffalo gets nearly hunted to extinction. And so, you know, like we've seen in previous, you know, iterations of westward migration in American history, it's going to be Native Americans those communities, those nations are going to be decimated as a result of this westward expansion. Now, the railroads are not going to be the only major industry that is going to be emerging during this time period. You know, as we start to move, past the Mississippi River, and especially as we start to get west of the Rocky Mountains, there is going to be, you know, less and less what you would consider to be traditional farming land, particularly if you're talking about, you know, places, you know, like I said, between the Rocky Mountains right here and the West Coast. Places like Utah and Nevada, you know, are going to be known as these vast deserts. But note, though, that these areas that might not be very conducive to traditional farming will be areas to some degree of development in mining. If you take a look at this map here, you're going to see a whole number of these western states that are going to be, you know, popping up in terms of creating new mining towns, boom towns, you know, depending on, you know, if it's gold, for example, out here in the Sacramento area. It could be, you know, copper down here in Tombstone, Arizona, or it could be silver out here in Virginia City, Nevada. You're going to see this vast expansion of people moving out west. Now, we mentioned previously, obviously, about the big California gold rush in 1849, but it's not going to be the only place. You know, as I just said a moment ago, the Comstock lode, when that's going to be found out here in Virginia City, it's going to lead to the development of what is going to become the Reno, Carson City, Lake Tahoe region of America. Additionally, you know, in all of these kinds of places, you know, there's going to be this real excitement of moving out there once there's gold or silver or copper or tin that's supposedly discovered out there. And you see a rush of people moving to these places. And these mining camps eventually quickly become, you know, what we would call boom towns. That you start to see, you know, for example, within a matter of a month, you might see thousands of people showing up at this mining camp. And when you've got thousands of people in this same location, you know, people are going to need basic services. They're going to need food. They're going to need laundry. They're going to need, you know, all sorts of stuff, you know, dry goods stores. And yes, there's also going to be plenty of saloons and gambling casinos and houses of ill repute and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, these boom towns really do have an accurate name because they do spring up almost overnight. Now, you know, if you are a young man looking for a good time and, you know, adventure, you know, this might be a great opportunity. However, you know, the downside is that, you know, you're going to see these communities pop up without any kind of real infrastructure for law enforcement. And so, you know, this is where we kind of get this notion of, you know, the Wild West version of justice and, you know, vigilante, you know, justice and things like that are going to be common. Now, note, some of these boom towns are going to eventually become very, very successful. They're going to be lasting. You know, Denver, Colorado is going to be, you know, maybe the best example, perhaps, of a mining boom town that's going to have real lasting power. But for many others, like, for example, you know, Tombstone in Arizona down here, you know, once the resources have been mined out, then that's it. You know, there's really no other reason to be there. You know, if you're going to be in the middle of the desert, you better have a darn good reason for being there. So some of these places, just kind of went kaput. And once again, remember, when we talk about mining out west, it's individuals that will be going out there first. There might be some few lucky, individuals that might use the traditional placer mining method of, a sifter and a pan and that kind of stuff. But the real money is going to be made in mining by the corporations that are going to have the investment, they're going to have the capital, they're going to have the equipment and resources to actually go deep into the earth to extract the vast majority of those precious metals and make money off of it. And of course, the other folks that are going to make any kind of real money in these mining communities are those that are not actually doing mining. It might be doing laundry or selling groceries or something along those lines. So these mining communities are going to be an example of, once again, this continuous notion of go west, young man. You may have been a failure in New York, or you may have been a failure in Ohio, or a failure in Missouri. Just go west, try again, and, see what happens. For many, not so successful, but for others, it will lead to some degree of success and many new opportunities. So we're going to go ahead and leave it there for this video right now. Next time, we will be talking about the emerging cattle ranching industry and aspects of plains farming. Okay? Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.